Yeah, and I want to show the shifting explanation I mentioned a minute ago about why President Trump chose to freeze nearly $400 million in that military aid Joe's talking about to Ukraine. On Monday, the president said this.
It's very important to talk about corruption. If you don't talk about corruption, why would you give money to a country that you think is corrupt?
Less than 24 hours later, the president said this.
I'll continue to withhold until such time as Europe and other nations contribute to Ukraine. Why is it only the United States putting up the money? And by the way, we paid that money. I think it's unfair that we put up the money. Then people called me, they said, oh, let it go, and I let it go.
According to Washington Post fact-checker analysis, Europe has been a major funder to Ukraine since Russia annexed its Crimean Peninsula in 2014, often providing more aid than does the United States. In fact, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, among the top 10 donors in gross overseas development assistance for Ukraine in 2016-2017, they were European institutions, Germany, Poland, Sweden, and Britain. It's also important to note. Yeah.
So Willie, can we go
numbers.
back to that chart for a second? Let's look at the numbers for 1 second. Donald Trump just said yesterday, sports fans, that Europe needed to contribute, that the United States was contributing assistance and nobody else was. If you add up European institutions, Germany, Poland, Sweden, Britain, and Switzerland, just the European countries, they actually have contributed in gross overseas development assistance for Ukraine in 16 and 17, at least 3 times as much as the United States. So, Willie, another excuse, another lie.
It did feel like he was reaching into the bag of greatest hits. Remember, this is an argument for NATO as well, that Europe's not paying enough, NATO membership's not paying enough, so we're going to withhold from them. Kind of feels like he made it up on the fly at the UN yesterday.
Yeah, burden sharing has been a staple of the argument for 50 years. The problem is the facts don't support it. Let's just come back to the basics here. I actually think this is qualitatively different and more serious than 2016. It's not simply inviting a foreign government to get involved in the American political process. But it's also something he can do now that he couldn't do in 2016. He has the powers of the presidency at his disposal. He's the commander-in-chief. He has the foreign affairs power. So to me, what is decisively different about this is the ability to leverage the availability of U.S. security assistance. That is something no candidate can do. It's only something an incumbent president can do. That, to me, is where a line is crossed.
Let's go to Heidi and Jake now for more on that extraordinary address that Speaker Pelosi made yesterday. Heidi, I'll start with you. I guess my question this morning is, what is different procedurally now? Because there was not a special committee appointed. In fact, inside that meeting with the caucus, Speaker Pelosi is quoted as saying, it doesn't change much from what's already going on, beside the fact that I'm now with you on this.
What will happen is that Thursday will be another inflection point. Tomorrow, when we get that whistleblower complaint, we've seen a big shift here in the way that Republicans have responded to this, in that the Republican Senate voted unanimously to release that whistleblower complaint. The House is going to do the same. And then from there, we will see how the Speaker proceeds and whether the Judiciary Committee is going to actually move on forming some type of articles. I imagine that they're going to want to not only see the complaint, but they're also going to want to speak to the whistleblower and have the whistleblower testify. Now, in my discussions yesterday with lawmakers who are leaving that caucus meeting, there's a broader question here. On the one hand, Speaker Pelosi says she wants them to move expeditiously. On the other hand, given that all of these 6 committees are now operating under this umbrella of impeachment inquiry, it is the legal theory of the Democrats that they're going to have greater tools at their disposal to move their requests through the court system, to compel witnesses, to compel testimony. And they're making clear that they are not at all backing off on all of these other investigations that are running on various tracks. And so you could see more information popping, for example, on emoluments or hush money. So all of these things will come into play. But the one thing that among many, actually, that, Richard mentioned about the lines that have been crossed here and how this is different from 2016. Based on my reporting, Speaker Pelosi also said in the meeting to members, look, this is not just the president asking a foreign country to provide or using assistance from a foreign country, opposition research on their opponent. But this is at the president demanding that a foreign country actually actually manufacture this evidence, because we've already reported, as have numerous outlets, that the Ukrainians themselves dispute the facts in this case, that this case regarding this prosecutor who Trump alleges there was something nefarious with Biden's involvement in firing him, was accused of corruption himself, and that the case itself had been dormant for about a year. So that's yet another way in which this distinguishes from 2016.
So, Jake, as you know very well, Speaker Pelosi has held off the Impeachment Caucus among Democrats for a couple of years now, and it's really intensified in the last few months. She's held the line, saying she thinks it's good for the president. We ought not do it. What broke the dam for her? What was the moment? What did she see where she said, all right, I'm with you now. I'm going to go out and address the country?
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second, and I'm going to answer your question in the form of answering a larger question, which is nothing changed. Nancy Pelosi put a name on this. Impeachment inquiry is not a legal standard. It's a phony deal. It's a political title that she is giving to a process, as Heidi noted, she is now behind. That's important because for many months, Jerry Nadler and Nancy Pelosi were working against each other. They were clashing. Jerry Nadler was way far out. Nancy Pelosi, as of last week, a week and a half ago, said that impeachment is divisive, and she declined to even answer questions about it. So what happened was she started to see that these frontline, vulnerable Democrats who had flipped Republican seats were beginning to come out in favor of impeachment. So the argument that she was protecting them was peeled away. That was incredibly important. And, it's interesting. I try at the end of the day to talk to people in leadership and ask what we're missing, what is being reported that is not right, what do you think is not getting across of what you're trying to do. And almost to a person last night, everyone kind of said this is just all a big kind of hullabaloo over something we were already doing. But don't underestimate the significance of Pelosi getting behind it, because now she will have control over this process, which is, for Democrats, probably a hopeful sign that she's going to wrangle control of a process that almost all Democrats think has gotten out of hand. One more note here. Democrats desperately, and this came up in the closed-door meeting yesterday, desperately need to find a message. How are they going to talk about what they're doing? If they talk about process, they are going to lose, and they're going to drop in the polls, and it could impact them negatively. A lot of Democrats are urging Pelosi and House Democrats to talk about this as a national security issue. The president is playing games with national security. That's how they want them to talk about this. I do not anticipate that this will go beyond the Ukraine story. I don't think we're going to get into the hotel and the Mueller report. There's a reason that this happened now, and the reason is this is easy to understand and it's easy to explain to the American people should Democrats want to.
You look at the people that actually were out talking yesterday, Mika, the Democrats, and you had a lot of women, of course, from swing districts who served in the military, who served in the intel community, who were former prosecutors. They had a very compelling message all day yesterday, following up on what Jake Sherman just said, that this was not about politics. It was not about partisanship. This was about national security. And how compelling when you have a Democrat saying, I fought in Iraq, or I fought in Afghanistan, I fought in hot wars. The idea that somebody would withhold badly needed weaponry for political reasons at home is beyond the pale. So Jake's exactly right. If this continues to be about national security and the president actually undermining America's national security across the world, undermining allies who are invaded by Vladimir Putin in Russia for his own political gain, that is a message that will have resonance with a lot of Americans.
And of course, we all remember he told George Stephanopoulos that he would do something like this, that he would get dirt on a political opponent from a foreign entity. Everybody was gobsmacked at the thought of it. Little did we know that it potentially could have been happening in real time. Still ahead on Morning Joe, Rudy Giuliani's meltdown last night on television. Plus, A pair of U.S. Senators, Democrat Chris Coons and Republican John Kennedy, join our conversation. But first, brand new polling has just published in the last few minutes, and Elizabeth Warren has not only caught but passed Joe Biden in the race for the White House. We'll break down the numbers straight ahead. And as we go to break, a reminder of just what's at stake in Ukraine. Here's NBC's Bill Neely back in February.
On frozen ground, a hot war. Ukraine fighting to survive. Its troops take us to the front line, where they're battling Russian-backed separatists.
Russian-made. Yep.
We sprint across open ground and into trench warfare, an extraordinary vision of World War I in today's Europe. A 5-year war almost forgotten by the world. They worry Russian troops will invade.
It's my country. It's my earth. It's mine. I born in this place.
You don't want to live under Russian rule?
No.
Never.
Never.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.